It's now time for the Grobstein and Schuster Express on 1252 Sports Chicago.
All aboard!
And now, here are your hosts, Les Grobstein and David Schuster.
And good evening, and welcome into the latest edition of the Grobstein Schuster Express. It's brought to you by Nick and Ivy's Brewery. It's located at 1026 South State Street in beautiful downtown Lockport, and much more from our sponsor a little bit later on in this podcast. And if you're tuning in right now, we are live, we are interactive. So if you have questions of Les or myself, or just questions in general, comments, feel free to chime in. And very shortly, we'll be joined by a good friend to both Les and myself, who we've worked with for years and years and years, Bruce Levine, who you can follow on Twitter at MLB Bruce Levine. And Bruce, of course, is the host of Inside the Clubhouse on WSCR, the Scores Sports Radio 670. But first, Les, let's talk about, we're going to have a lot of baseball talk, obviously, Les, with Bruce. And you and I will start off in just a couple of seconds with that also. But it's funny. The Bulls, as we speak right now, are playing their final game over at the United Center. And just in time, the fans got in, about 2 games ago? And I think they got in for 2 games.
Just in time to stay eliminated.
Yes. Hello, goodbye. That's pretty much the case over there. They're both eliminated. It's disappointing, of course, especially to the bean counters who, look forward to all the money that they can hopefully get from the playoffs. But just in time to see both teams get eliminated, the fans got into the building. So my question right off the bat, Les, which of these 2 teams, the Bulls and the Blackhawks, who are, basically going to be on the golf course here very shortly, which one do you think has a better chance in the near term to maybe round the corner and maybe get into the postseason next year?
I think you could flip a coin.
Yeah.
The Blackhawks had the youngest team in the National Hockey League this year. They were bad defensively, and I'm not talking about just the defensive players, the blue line players, but, Duncan Keith was great. There were others that, they did not protect the blue spot on the ice. In other words, the blue area, and they did a very poor job. As far as the Bulls go, after they made the trade, Vucevic was doing quite well and helping them. And I think he's going to have a great future with them. But Zach Levine, the time that he spent out, they might have been able to sneak into the play-in if he wouldn't have gotten hurt and put on the injured list at that point.
Actually, I feel sort of bad for whoever's paying money to see tonight's game over at the United Center. It's the Bulls in Milwaukee. And Brooklyn won its game a little bit earlier, Les. So Milwaukee could not get past Brooklyn for the number 2 seed. So Milwaukee all of a sudden decided, okay, well, we got nothing to play for. So they shelved their starting lineup, and those guys are all sitting. And the Bulls, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're trying to increase their odds of making a higher lottery chance. And again, it's if it's top 4 protected in that Vucevic trade. So Levine is not playing tonight, and Vucevic is not playing, and a couple other guys aren't playing either. So for all you people who shelled out all that money for tonight's game, sorry. That's the way it goes.
Wah. Yeah. And that's the other thing about that, too. And, this team had a chance, like I said, to sneak in, but they're not going to be there. They probably don't deserve to be in the playoffs anyway. They had a lot of, last year was a lot worse under Jim Boylan. I think they're a better coach team. They have a lot of things that they can look forward to, but they're going to have to make some changes between now and next year. They need to get a true point guard. I still think Kobe White has a future on this team coming off the bench as a number 6 guy. Remember, Ben Gordon was a number 6 guy, and he wasn't a point guard, and he wasn't even close to being a point guard, but he was very good. I think that Kobe White can be even more all-around than maybe even Ben Gordon was.
I think you summed it up just perfectly. Yes, I would agree with you that I think that Kobe White is a 6th man, and that's nothing, to denigrate him by saying that. I mean, there have been some of the greats of all time. Wouldn't you like to have a Vinnie Johnson come off your bench and help you win some championships like he did?
Havlicek?
Say again?
Starter John Havlicek was a reserve too.
There you go. Jamal Crawford has been a sixth man, and who comes off the bench and scores a lot. Lou Williams out in with the Clippers for many years, he did the same thing out them. So those guys are worth their weight in gold. I think the Vucevic trade. I've had some disagreements with some people who think that the whole thing was too much of a gamble by giving up 2 potential first-round picks to get Vucevic. But again, Les, when you have a chance to get an all-star center, even though he's, not the perfect player himself, I think that's a gamble that you got to take. And I think between him and Levine, neither one of them has had any success ever in the postseason. Levine's never even been in the postseason. But I think they have a decent chance going forward if they add the point guard, like you say. I don't think Markkanen's going to be on this team next year. I think they're going to use that money in another direction to hopefully get something else to help them out. So if they end up getting that top 4 pick or 3 or 2 or even 1, then I think they're in real good shape going forward. Again, it was a gamble giving up those 2 first-round picks, but I thought it was a gamble worth taking.
I think they had to do it, and I agree with you. I like the fact that they did what they had to do with Markkanen. I wish him well. I hope he does well on another team, and I think he will eventually be with another team. But he was not brought in by this group. He was brought in by He was brought in by Gar Pax per se, and there were some others that were brought in by that group as well. Just like there's a lot of guys that the Cubs had brought in. There's 2 guys that were brought in the past by the names of Contreras and Baez, and they were brought in by the previous regime. Everybody else was brought in by the current regime since it was taken over. So sometimes you keep people that were here when you arrived and they work out. And where would they be right now on the Cubs side without Javi Baez and without Wilson Contreras?
It's interesting, Les. I'm doing a feature for somebody else on the Blackhawks dynasty, the dynasty being the 3 Stanley Cups in 10, 13, and 15. And as I'm going back, and the first one in 10 is already 11 years old already. I'm reliving all those memories. And you know what, Les, because you were right by me in all 3 of those. We traveled together. We were in Philly. We were in Boston. And, of course, at the United Center for the win against Tampa Bay for that 3rd Stanley Cup. It seems so long ago. It really does. It seems like, well, one of them is more than a decade ago, but it just seems so long ago, those 3 championships. Yeah,
the Vegas Golden Knights didn't exist yet. The 2 Florida teams, Tampa Bay was a good team. You and I both knew there was a pretty fast team, and they did a good job, and the Blackhawks got by them. If they played either one of those teams now in a playoff series, they would get wiped out, and they were beaten by them both in the regular season, and that's why they finished below both of them. Question is, what's the division that they're going to be in look like? Are they going to be back with the St. Louis Blues and not with the Detroit Red Wings and Columbus Blue Jackets next year? Because they were put in a division with those teams because they wanted all the Eastern Conference teams to be teams from the Eastern time zone, and that included Detroit and Columbus. And now those teams are back with the Blackhawks, and then you had the 2 Florida teams, you had Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. A lot different now than it was back then. Well, it'll be really interesting, if nothing else, Les, to see if Canada is going to let U.S. teams come across the border and vice versa for the Canadian teams to come down here, that whole division. Matter of fact, I think the NHL has sort of asked the government of Canada, are you going to allow these teams? Because once, after they have the divisional series, whoever comes out of that Canadian division, whatever that is called, is going to eventually have to play against somebody else in the United States. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but thankfully, this pandemic is rounding its turn here. Beavis Bettman has said that he's going to eventually have this thing all figured out, and that they've got. And I don't believe him. Just like I don't trust Rob Manfred with baseball. There's a lot of commissioners I don't trust. I certainly don't trust Bettman as far as I could breathe. All right, before we get to baseball, like I said, this show is interactive. So, again, people have the capability of throwing their comments up on the screen. And my good buddy, Mr. Scott Beatty, also a.k.a. Mr. Podcast, has already chimed in.
talk about comments from the peanut gallery, but more from him later on, by the way. And by the way, we do a show with myself and Scott called Stuff Your Mom Threw Out. Les, I know you've heard that before, so we'll talk more about that as time goes on. But the Cubs and the White Sox real quickly, Les, before we bring in Bruce. The White Sox with a walk-off win on the wild pitch today, and I think he was actually out at the plate, but that's another story. So the White Sox split the series with Kansas City. Kansas City snapped their 11-game skid against the Sox earlier in the series. The Sox come back and win 2 out of the last 3 games. They have the best record in baseball. They're 9 over 500, have a 2-game lead in their division. And the Cubs basically treading water. They are 3.5 out in their division. They won today behind Kyle Hendricks 5-1. They're a game under 500. I've been saying all along, but come the trading deadline, there are going to be some guys who are going to go because I think they'll fall out of the race further and further.
What about Bryant? What about Chris Bryant, who has been tearing the cover off the ball? However, it's obvious that, he and the Cub front office have been on different pages all along, and Scott Boras is involved with it, and that's not a good thing as far as Cub management goes.
Yeah, I think Chris Bryant will be one of the 2 players I think that will be traded at the deadline, which means they're not going to sign him, obviously. And I think Craig Kimbrell, who's been overall pretty good. I know he got tagged with the loss in the 10th inning in the game yesterday in Detroit on Saturday. But you know what? With that stupid rule of starting a guy on second base in the 10th inning, listen, if a relief pitcher gives up something at that juncture, it's just the way it goes, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the fact is the Tigers got 2, but the Cubs had scored a run in the top half of the 10th inning. If Kimbrell would have done his job, then they would have won the game.
Yes, he's tagged for the loss, although I don't know if those runs are earned or not because the
first one is not earned at all.
Okay, then the second one was pending on what else happened in that inning. But again, what are your thoughts on the White Sox? Before we bring Bruce in here, what are your thoughts on the White Sox?
I think Abreu was terrific. It's amazing the way he got clocked the other day, and he was back in the lineup today, and he hustled home. And you're right, he might have been out by a teensy bit, but he was called safe. It was checked out with the people, with the geniuses in New York, and they didn't have enough evidence in their opinion. So, hey, the Sox won. Are they going to apologize for it? Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Before we bring in Bruce, I just wanted to quickly say if Mike can change. Hold on. I got to just do something here on my screen real quickly because there's been so much in the private chat line. But anyway, real estate is hot right now, and you need an attorney to handle all this. Mark Berardi does this all day long. He's a straight shooter, no fancy language, just to the point. He gets get the job and the deal done, no BS. He also does estate planning, trust, wills, power of attorney, probate. Great reviews, by the way, for Mark. He's got a big team supporting him. They're all just as down to earth and normal and real as he is, so you won't be disappointed that you went with him. He's located in Homer Glen and New Lenox, and he handles real estate all over Illinois. And again, Mark's number right now, you can contact him at 708-942-8030. And without further ado, we want to bring in Les, a good friend for both you and me for many, many years, Bruce Levine, who again, hey, there's Bruce. And you can follow Bruce on Twitter at MLB Bruce Levine. And Bruce dressed up even for this podcast tonight. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Yeah, I put a shirt on. Do you want me to stand up?
No. No. Thank you. No. Again, you can follow Bruce on Twitter at MLB Bruce Levine. And of course, Bruce is host of Inside the Clubhouse. And Bruce, we had George on last week. People are going to start thinking this is sort of like a nursing home podcast between all the guys that we have on.
What do you say, Sonny? What did you say?
Aren't you supposed to put like that thing in your ear and put it up to the
cornucopia? Yeah, I think that's what they were called. I think there's 100 and let's see, Les has 50, 80, 130 years of experience right here. You think some people we've scared off yet or not?
No doubt about it. Yeah, we're skewering to a certain audience. It's called dead. Bruce, were you at the game today?
I was. Yeah, it was a fascinating game, and the ending is probably worth really talking about for a long time because let's just explain what happened there. It appeared on replay to many people that it was 50-50. Sox fans are going to say he was safe. Other people maybe more objective, we're going to say it looked like he tagged him before he got the hand in. Okay. The rule states this as far as replay, unless it's obvious, and they played it back like 40 times, unless there's a clear definition that the call was wrong, the call stays. Okay. That's just the way it is. And in this case, it really came up and bit Kansas City. Mike Matheny, the manager, had some very tough things to say about the replay system and
we
how.
We can't quote him now, can we?
I guess not. But he basically said, look, if you're going to cater to the home crowd and the home team because you have a game deciding situation, then this thing doesn't work. Now it's sour grapes, of course, because his team lost, but he might have he might have a point. There's a good chance that it was tied. But again, the letter of the law is, unless it's clear and definitive, the initial call stays, and that's what they did today with this safe call.
Hey, Bruce,
I have no sympathy for the Royals or for Matheny or anything else. You know what? Their pitcher threw the ball into the dirt. It got away. The Sox won the game fair and square, as they say. But I got to say, this is another proof, and I've been this way since they put it in. Instant replay doesn't work. I don't like instant replay. I didn't like it since they started, and I still don't like it. And sometimes the team I'm rooting for gets a break. The teams I'm not rooting for gets a bad break. I think instant replay, since they started it in the National Football League, it was terrible then. It's terrible the way they do it in hockey. It's terrible the way they do it in basketball. And I think what Rob Manfred has done with some of the rules that he's put in baseball, he's trying to reinvent the game, and he's wrecking it.
Well, I have strong opinions about some of the rules too, and I agree with you. The man on second base rule is fascist. Okay,
it's a piece of full-blooded garbage.
It should be in another country where the government controls people more, because that is totally alien to the game of baseball. Why is it alien? The reason is that you're rewarding a team with a man on second base that has not earned it. Everything in baseball is earned except the 10th inning rule, where they put a man on second base, and they're saying to you, well, Mr. Fan, Mr. Media Person, Mr. Owner, we can't keep the attention of our fans any longer. We have so many bullpen, so many bullpen pitchers that we have to protect them. Therefore, we have to come up with this crazy rule that we put a man on second base to end the game. I think, they might as well even it out by putting like a ball and chain on him so he can't run as fast. So
why don't they just load the bases? Just load the bases to start each inning once we get in extra innings. It's already stupid. Let's make it even more stupid.
Their point is well taken in one area. The modern fan has no aptitude and no desire to watch anything that goes beyond 9 innings. You can barely, and you can't blame them, because it's 3 hours and 10 minutes, okay? Now, that's just the average. A lot of these games that we attend and that we watch and cover are 4 hours. That's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount of time. When we first started covering games 40, and in your case, less 50 years ago, the average time a game was like 2 hours and 35 minutes.
Because the commercial breaks were not as long as they are now. And when you talk about the postseason, it's even longer. If they say, well, let's speed it up this way, that it's not going to speed up, because the TV networks that carry the postseason games, they're not going to give that stuff up. They never were going to give it up, and they're not going to give it up now.
Well, and no matter how much,
because it's a slow game. It's a slow game because the commercial breaks are long, and they're not going to get rid of them.
It's slow game because it's strikeout, walk, and home run the last 3 innings, and there's no action. And they're trying to address that now with Theo Epstein thinking about new rules about.
He's going to make it even longer. He's part of the problem, along with Billy Beane. They're both part of the problem.
They want to put the pitching mound back to 60 feet maybe 62 feet, throw an underhand and blindfold the pitcher as well at the same time.
It should be like
complete unadulterated idiots.
All right. It should be like King in his court. They should be blindfold from second base. That's what they should do now.
And bring in the outfielders.
Right. Bruce, you know, and Les knows this also. Nobody hated long baseball games more than me and extra innings. But yeah, okay, Les, you're laughing at me. I know that. But anyway,
we used to call those David.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. David Schuster, whatever. I know.
David Schuster special when they were long games.
Yes, which was always. But bastardizing the sport, in my estimation, is not making it better, and that's what they've done. And Bruce, you asked a really good question on the post-game Zoom after Kopech threw the other day. He had a really good 4-inning stint in a 7-inning game, and your question was, well, wait a second. If it's a 7-inning game, then why does 4 innings not get you the victory in a 7-inning game? And I've been thinking that since the beginning of the season. And we'll ask your opinion on these 7-inning no-hitters, which in my estimation are not no-hitters. I don't care what anybody says. But why isn't, if a pitcher goes 4 innings in a 7-inning game, it's more of a ratio than 5 and 9. Why doesn't he get the win?
Because somebody forgot.
That's right.
I think it's 100%. It's like, well, wait a minute. It was you have to throw 5 innings in a 9-inning game. Oh, we didn't think about the fact that you're only going 7. That's a complete game now. And 4 should constitute a win. So, again, Kopech should have had a win, pitched a beautiful 4 innings, if you can say that without choking, because that's what the game is now. You hear a brilliant 5 innings of pitching, by somebody that gave up 1 run and 3 hits, but has 100 pitches. That's the nature of the game right now. But someone clearly forgot to go in and go, oh yeah, we should have shortened the rules so they can get a win after 4. Nonetheless, I'm going to disagree with you on the no-hitter for 7 innings because, and again, 9 innings without giving up a hit constitutes a no-hitter. Agree with you 100%. However, never have we had up until this point 7 innings considered to be a complete game. That's the new rule, right? You can't play more than 7 innings in doubleheaders. So therefore, if that's a complete game, 7 innings is a complete game by baseball's rules, right? On a doubleheader, then if a guy doesn't give up a hit, it's a no-hitter.
I know, but the whole thing is just plain stupid that they're even having 7-inning games to begin with. And listen, they Major League Baseball themselves says that it's not a no-hitter. Even though it's a complete game no-hitter in 7 innings, Major League Baseball is not putting it into the rule book as a no-hitter. So if they're not going to do it, neither am I. It's a nice 7-inning performance, no ifs, ands, or buts. And Bruce, I'm sure you saw this stat. If they would have had 7-inning no-hitters, Nolan Ryan would have had 26 for his career.
I know.
Okay?
Yeah, we all agree that these rules are hard to get your head around. I have to admit, going back to when Bud Selig took over and they started changing things to different divisions, interleague play, wild card, I was firmly opposed to all of that. And it proved out to me eventually that I was totally wrong on all of that. All that's worked very well. I still don't think interleague play works anymore. I think it's had its run and it should be over with. Everybody got to see everyone else. It's great. Nobody comes out to see players anymore. Nobody comes out to see a Scherzer pitch or Verlander pitch. Those days are gone in baseball. They're just picking out the games that they think they can go to, and the families make it appropriate to go to. So from the perspective of interleague play, that's gone. But, the wild cards worked out perfectly. And revenue-wise, it's a must to stay within the realm of continuing to gouge fans and getting more money out of them.
Hey, Bruce, obviously the White Sox have continued winning, even though they split the series with Kansas City. They continue to win. They're 9 games over 500. They do have the best record at this juncture of the baseball season than anybody. They have a 2-game lead in their division, and they're doing it the way I thought they were going to do it once Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez went down. pitching, pitching, pitching. It's always going to be the name of the game. And fortunately for the White Sox, up until at least this juncture, and I think it'll continue, their bullpen's got to get a little bit better overall, but their starting pitching, for the most part has been really, really good. And that should be able to carry them. Jimenez will not be back this season. I'm pretty confident in that. And Robert is a big if. But if they get that pitching, they should be able to stay in it the whole way.
It is, but the defense has to get better.
It does.
And the best defensive player I've seen all year is Jose Abreu. And I never thought I would be able to say that, because this was a guy up until 3 years ago that was a below average first baseman. And at the All-Star break in 2018, Rick Renteria called Abreu into the office, and he said, look, we've had some discussions, and we think you're going to be the best DH in baseball, because he was having a brutal first half of the season defensively. So they take this negative narrative and turn it into a positive by saying, Jose, you're going to be the best DH in baseball. And he goes, no, I'm not. I'm never going to be a DH. I hate it. And then to his credit, Rick Renteria said, well, unless you work hard and get better, that's what you're going to be. And he, to his credit, he worked like the devil to get better, and he's gotten better and better every year. And this year, I think he's saved probably 10, 12 throwing errors that I can think of. A lot of them from Anderson, some of them from Madrigal, who's had some yip-type throws over to first base. This is an amazing guy to watch, because at age 33, going on 34, he's gotten better and better, which is amazing to me. So congratulations to Jose Abreu and the White Sox. He is the world leader in RBIs since 2019. He continues to be that one.
Boy, the White Sox have really done good at bringing up players from Cuba. I mean, there have been a few South American type players, but they have really, really owned the island of Cuba at getting players up here. And Abreu is just a classic example.
Yeah, and they're terrific players. I mean, they are terrific athletes. They're different from some of the players in Venezuela and the Dominican. I can't tell you why, and I'm not going to give you a breakdown of the physiology of it all, because I don't know anything about that. All I can tell you is they're different. They play the game a little differently, and they're really, really talented players.
Let's go across town, Bruce. The Cubs, as I mentioned to Les a little bit while ago, they're just a game under 500. They're 19-20. They're 3.5 out in an overall pretty ordinary division. St. Louis leading the pack at this juncture. Of deadline, which is the end of July, that if they're more than 6 games out, which I think they will be at that point, I think there's going to be a sell-off, Bruce. And I think the first 2 guys that you think of who might go are Chris Bryant, obviously, for a litany of reasons, and the other one will be Craig Kimbrell. And if that is indeed the case, what kind of haul could they fetch for either or both of those guys?
Tell me how good they're doing at that time. Tell me look, injuries seem to be at an all-time high again.
Yep.
People are dropping left and right. If the contending teams, and the reason July makes sense, the trading deadline, is because most teams have an idea whether they're a contender or pretender by that time. And the teams are more even now than they've ever been. So maybe we won't know in July who's better and who isn't. But if teams continue to lose difference makers who think they're in the playoff hunt or in the hunt to win a World Series, the Cubs will get more than you think in the way of young people for Bryant or for a Rizzo or for a Baez or for a Kimbrell. They really will, because in those times, teams really want to get to the playoffs. They really want to, step up their game. Even a team like the Dodgers, who have lost a lot of guys to injuries right now, and Seager is the latest guy with a broken finger. He's going to be out for a month. They have the resources to give you good players, because they have still a lot of good young players in their system and not miss a beat. So they can do what the Cubs did back in 2016. They can trade away an Eloy Jimenez type or a Dylan Cease type or they can trade away, a Gleyber Torres, and it might hurt down the line, but they also might win a world championship.
With regard to the Cubs situation, I was talking to David about it earlier. If they didn't keep two guys from the Jim Hendry era, Contreras, very important there, and Baez, if they didn't have those guys, where would they be right now? Because these are the two holdovers from the previous regime.
You're right, Les, 100%. I will give the Epstein, Hoyer, McLeod people credit for developing those guys because they were signed. They were very young players when they took over, so they were developed. But they were the Jim Hendry people. They were the people that were picked out from their scouting people at that time. They would be in a bad place because they're still two of the better players, not only on the Cubs, but in the league. Contreras is one of the best catchers in baseball, no matter what your metrics tell you about his framing and all that garbage. I think framing is good, but, if he's not a great framer, he's gotten to be a much better defensive catcher, and he does a lot of things that other catchers in baseball cannot do. He can hit, he can run, he can throw. He's a really good player. But from the perspective of development, I think the McLeod era is starting to show up a little bit better for him. He was moved out of the job as the vice president of scouting and player development because there wasn't any players developed, no pitchers at all. And now we're starting to see on the cusp of the Alzolays, the Thompsons, the people like that are coming, pretty quick. And I think you're going to see in the second half for the Cubs, Steele and Thompson be starting pitchers for them. I think that some of these veterans will be moved out. Some of them will be gone by attrition. Some will be traded. And I think you're going to see some of those young arms. You might see a dominant team developed in the Cub organization with Steele and Thompson, Hendricks not, but Alzolay. That might be your rotation going into the second half, or at least the last third of the season.
Bruce, I got a couple of questions myself, but Eric Eldridge just chimed in on screen, and he wants to know if you think that Rizzo will ultimately resign with the Cubs, or will he be a free agent?
I think ultimately he comes back. He is such an important player for them in a lot of ways. And it's just not – he's still a platinum glove first baseman. He's still a very good hitting first baseman with power. But he transcends that with all the things he is as a Cub, what he's done off the field as a Cub, in the community, representing himself the way he has. And the Cubs will need to continue to have star quality players to be able to sell that ballpark out. If you're in the middle of a rebuild, you still have to have star quality players, as we learned during the Sammy Sosa era. It was, 10 years of Cubs lose, Sammy homers twice. Okay. He carried the franchise on his back for 10 years, whether you like him, you don't, you think he did steroids or not. Fact is, he was the marquee player, the guy that everybody came out to watch. So they're going to continue to have that because they have very high prices on their tickets. And I don't think there's been very many teams in history that have been interested in dropping ticket prices once it got to a certain level. Maybe in baseball overall, we'll see that at some point. Otherwise, you have to satisfy the fans and give them their star players while you're rebuilding.
Bruce, a couple real quick ones here. Albert Pujols, are you surprised, for lack of a better term? It sure seemed like he wanted to play full time. Maybe he'll get more playing time than I think, but he's going to sign with the Dodgers. Does that surprise you, or does he ultimately think, hey, this is the team that's going to win the World Series again?
Well, the Dodgers are so messed up as far as injuries. I get it. It's not going to cost them anything. I mean, the Angels pay the entire salary, except for the rookie, $550,000 that they have to pay him. But the superstars that are 41 years old, and I have all the admiration in the world for Albert Pujols, they're the last ones to know that they're done. Okay, Albert Pujols has not had an OPS above 670 or 680 for the last 3 years. If you're a power hitter and you're a guy that is dependent on to get on base, you're not getting it done. Now, to his credit, he's played on one foot for the last 5 or 6 years. Terrible foot problems, plantar fasciitis, the whole bit. And I admire him as much as any player in baseball. But Albert, you're 41. You're done. It should have been done the way the Angels did it, but it was his fault because he didn't want to accept the fact that his career is over with. He has 700 home runs in his mind. He has other goals that have nothing to do with teams winning. You know what, Albert? It's time to hang it up.
Let me ask you one more name, Joe Maddon. Of course, will always go down in Chicago annals of history, Cub history, being the manager when the team won, broke the whole thing in 2016. He has not done very well record-wise out in Anaheim, and there's been some criticism of a lot of the things that he continues to do. There was criticism of him, and honestly, I understood a lot of it, and so did you when he was here with the Cubs. But the bottom line is he's not winning out in Anaheim. What's the story out there more than what we know because we're so far away?
Pitching still isn't good enough. And the Ohtani experiment is stupid, okay? This guy has to be one or the other. And he's already shown pitching-wise that his arm can't hold up because he throws 98, but his biggest pitch is a splitter, okay? What do we know about the splitter? Other than Bruce Sutter and Elroy Face back in the 50s and 60s, unless you have the structure of your hand where you have exceptionally long fingers, the split finger fastball will eventually erode your rotator cuff and you will be out of the game. So Ohtani is not going to last as a split finger pitcher. He's a legit 30 home run, 100 RBI guy. Let him play out there. I mean, he's a young guy. He's going to win a lot of games for you hitting. Forget about the pitching part. They need more pitchers. Quintana went over there. He's been awful. Just terrible. They need 2 or 3 more pitchers. They're not there yet. They have a young general manager, a good friend of mine, Perry Manasian, whose father and grandfather are good friends of mine from Chicago, and were, big baseball people their whole lives. He's going to do a really good job there. Perry is great. But it's his first year there. They've had some tough issues, including this Albert situation. It's going to take another year or so. Joe has only one more year left on the contract. We'll see what happens.
Let me ask you a question, Bruce. This is a little bit off the subject, but kind of still on it. Sammy Sosa, we covered his entire career. We know what he meant to the Cubs. Should his number be retired? Should the Cubs be welcoming back? And is a guy like Tom Ricketts overdoing it by saying he's got to come out and admit that whether he did it or not, you're going to come out and admit it or you're not going to be welcome back here? Has this whole thing been overdone?
It might have been, but you know what? It's Tom's franchise, him and his family. They believe that the way Sammy left here, and it wasn't just the steroids, just walked out and never came back.
He was given permission before he walked out that day, that last game against the Reds. He was given permission to leave before the game started.
Well,
you were there that day, so was I.
Good friend of ours let that video out to all the TV stations of Sammy leaving before the game was done.
Which he was given permission to do.
Which is with his career was basically done here. So, again, I can't tell Tom Ricketts and his family what to do. Sammy has not done himself any favors by continually denying things and not coming hat in hand. Look, everybody that's come back has admitted that they've done steroids. I mean, that's it. Anybody's back in the game. The exception was Bonds, who had a limited role with the Giants a few years back. But the others have all admitted it, and it's gone away. I mean, they're not going to get in the Hall of Fame, it appears. But I personally, if Tom asked me, Bruce, should we bring Sammy back? I would say yes. I'd say because he was so popular here, and he meant so much to the franchise as far as entertaining people. Sure, he probably did steroids, okay? He wasn't the Lone Ranger. There was another 300 or 400 that did it at the very least. The problem with Bonds, Clemens, and Sammy were they were extraordinarily talented guys to begin with. Once they did steroids, they became superhuman, and they're the ones that are on the posters of the most wanted for the steroids eras. I'm not apologizing for them. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying there were hundreds and hundreds of players that did steroids during that era.
I want to say hello real quickly to a friend of mine who just tuned in, Hector. Hey, Marty, how you doing, buddy? Bruce, we're going to take a quick pause here. I just want to know, do you want to stick around? We have a couple of segments, including the ever popular Stump the Grobber, and I want to see if you can help out Les. Do you want to?
All right, I'm going to stay around for at least one. I mean, you guys have paid me enough to go through one more, I think.
This is what we're paying Bruce, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, the roundest number on the planet.
Or as they say in Yiddish, bubkiss.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll do Stump the Grobber also. But right now, a word from our sponsor, Nick and Ivy's on State Street in Lockport.
Hello, this is Paul from Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. We are located at 1026 South State Street in historic downtown Lockport, Illinois. We are very excited to be partnering up with the Fat Mike Chicago Sports Show, as well as the 1252 brand, because we are one of the few Chicagoland breweries that embrace sports and sports culture. Come in for a fresh brewed beer made right here in Lockport while catching the game of your favorite team. Stay for the live music that we have booked every weekend, or just come for a cozy atmosphere to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, loved one, or complete stranger. Nick and Ivy makes you feel right at home no matter what the occasion is. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. Visit our website for our up-to-date tap list or to go shopping on our online store at nickivybrewing.com. That's Nikivy brewing.com. Come in today for fresh brewed beer born and raised in Lockport, Illinois.
And we're back here right now. David Schuster, Les Grobstein, joined by our longtime friend, baseball savant, Bruce Levine, who you can follow on Twitter at MLB Bruce Levine. And I'm going to tell Mike to get the opening for Stump the Grobber ready, and Bruce is going to join in. So let's do our famous, or maybe it's infamous, I'm not really sure, Stump the Grobber time.
What was that?
Doesn't really make sense.
What?
Live and let live.
I'm not familiar with that
It's
expression.
a James Bond.
Doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Of course, I'm alive.
Two queens on casino night. I am going to drop a deuce on everybody.
I just want to say for the record, I did not kill anyone. Stanley was attacked by his own heart.
I know where this is going.
Do you? Okay. It's now time for Stump the Grobber on the Grobstein and Schuster Express.
And we welcome questions from the audience as well, but I have some already right in front of me. Bruce, we'll test your knowledge out as well as Les's, and we'll start right here on the north side of Chicago. It's a Cub question. There have been 6 Chicago Cubs who have been named Rookies of the Year. Go ahead, give me the 6.
Kenny Hubbs is one.
That's one.
I'm trying to recall. Billy Williams was too, wasn't he not?
That's number 2.
That's number 2. We saw Chris Bryant.
No.
He was not a Rookie of the Year?
Yes, he was. Sure he was.
I think he was.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So there's 7. My apologies. There are 7. My fault on that.
Kerry Wood.
That is another one. 4.
All right, Bruce, you want to show us what you can think of right now?
All right. Let's move on to...
Oh, yeah, Chris Bryant makes 6. I'm sorry. I did write it down. My fault on that one. So there are 6. There are 2 more.
Jerome Walton.
That is one of the last 2.
Yeah, and as it turned out, the Cubs had the runner-up that year as well, Dwight Smith.
That doesn't count in this one.
No, it does not. I'm just saying.
It does show you that you know your stuff.
Horseshoes, hand grenades doesn't count.
One more in the was it in the 2000s?
Yes.
Okay. That would be 2000 and
This is the one that I actually forgot.
2003.
That.
Unless you're looking it up, I can see you.
No, I'm not.
I'm blanked on that one.
Giovanni Soto.
Oh, yeah. 2000.
Whatever happened to him, Bruce?
Went up in smoke.
I remember him hitting a home run in Arizona during that playoff game that we covered there, and he tied the game up, and it was one of the few times that the loud bunch of Cub fans were able to cheer. Other than that,
long career. He did what Carlton Fisk did for many years. He continued to get season-ending injuries, and he kept elongating his career to the point. And you know, that's certainly not a knock on Fisk, who was fantastic, one of the great players of all time. But he broke his hand 3 years in a row, I think. Giovanni, I'm pretty sure he got at least. I'm going to say 9 years in the big leagues. It was mostly as a backup.
Did he play for the White Sox also at the end? And
ended up getting hurt. Just the same thing.
Yeah, I think he played up in Minnesota also, maybe down in Texas. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. So we got stumped.
Okay. All right. So 6 on the Cubs. There have also been 6 White Sox rookies of the year. Go at it.
Les.
Well, on the White Sox, my goodness gracious,
no, he's not one of them.
I'm going to say Frank Thomas was not one of them.
That's correct. He's not one of them. Les, I always love when you don't know the answer, you throw something else out there just to make it look good.
I'm trying to recall who the last White Sox run that was even Rookie of the Year at some point.
Well, there have been 6.
Okay, let's start with Luis Aparicio.
That's the very first one.
Okay.
Best shortstop I ever saw play with my own eyes.
Right. Let's then move up to, is Gary Peters one of them?
That was the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, he beat out Pete Ward, who was the runner-up for that year.
That's right. Les is right again. He got the runner-up again. Okay, so
that's great. He hasn't got any of the rookies of the year, though.
Okay.
But Peters, he had 19 wins that year.
Okay.
Right. Ron Kittle is one.
That is number 3.
Yeah. And that was 1983. Yeah. Let's move up to.
And he was even.
Sorry?
No, he had nothing to say. Don't worry.
Okay. Let's move up to, let's see, number 4 would be in the. Would it be in the 90s?
I'm not really sure what year.
Is he a shortstop?
Yes.
And one that hardly anyone ever remembers?
No.
Ozzie Guillen is the other one.
Yes, that's number 4.
Okay. That was in 1985.
You're forgetting the most recent one.
Yes, we are.
You're not talking about Tim Anderson, right?
Abreu.
Abreu is number 5.
Abreu.
And the last one is the hardest one.
Okay, because it's more recent, did you say?
No, it's going back.
Okay. In the 60s?
Late 60s, maybe early 70s. I'm not sure what year he played.
Okay. Was it a pitcher?
No.
Okay. Late 60s, early 70s.
Outfielder.
Tommy Agee.
That's correct.
Very good.
That's correct. So you got ultimately you got all 6 for both teams. All right. The last question here. I did my research on this one. Eddie Goodell. Everybody knows the story of Eddie Goodell. He was the midget who. It was the midget who Bill Veeck, when he was owner of the St. Louis Browns, brought up to the plate against the Tigers. I believe it was 1951, and he walked on 4 pitches.
Bob Kane.
You know it. Very good. Bob Kane. What was his nickname, Bruce?
Sugar.
That is correct as well.
You know what was said to him by Bill Veeck? I'm talking about to Goodell. He said, "Do you see that area up there? I'm going to be up there with a 4-gauge shotgun, if you swing at any pitch, I'm going to blow your head off.
You know what he actually said to Eddie Goodell was, look, Eddie, we're considering extending your contract, but we all feel you came up just a little bit short.
There's a couple other things that went along with this, and I Googled it myself. First of all, when Veeck first approached him, he told Goodell to, get down even lower than he was. Goodell ultimately didn't do that. They couldn't throw strikes to him anyway. But when he got down into the low crouch, they measured what his strike zone was. It was 1.5 inches. So it was physically impossible to throw a strike to those 4 pitches. Now, Kane tried. On his first 2 pitches he tried, and the pitch was they were just too high. He couldn't get down that low. Then ultimately he just threw a couple of eephus pitches and let him get to first base. Then they pinch ran for him. I think the Browns ended up losing that game for what it's worth. And Goodell was from Chicago. He was a Chicagoan. And Veeck, when he became owner of the White Sox, he brought Goodell in with a couple of other midgets. And, they brought him down into like a fake spaceship. And they went up to both Aparicio and to Nellie Fox. And, supposedly Goodell was supposed to say, take me to your leader or something along that. Or actually, those guys said it, take me to your leader. And Goodell said, nah, I've already met him. He's an asshole or something along those lines.
Well, let me ask you a question, and I know Bruce knows the answer. The St. Louis Browns, who are they today?
Did you hear that, Bruce?
Oh, no,
I know Bruce knows it.
I know.
I'm asking you, David, do you know?
The St. Louis Browns? Where did the Browns go to?
Who are they today? Who are they today? David definitely knows. I mean, I'm talking about Bruce knows.
I'm going to defer to Bruce. Just let him answer the question.
It's the Baltimore Orioles.
Correct.
Okay, very good. One last thing on Goodell. Unfortunately, he was beaten to death in an alley in Chicago, and the only major leaguer who ended up going to his funeral was Kane. He was the only guy. And
That's interesting. You know what? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, and Kane had never met him, never talked to him, but he felt compelled to be, at his funeral, and he was the only major leaguer who went to his funeral after, unfortunately he passed away at the age of 36.
It's a good story. I mean, a sad story, but an interesting story. But, that was Bill Veeck, certainly a very creative guy. Is that the end of Stump the Grobber?
That is the end of Stump the Grobber. And for playing, we have a parting gift for you today, Bruce.
I get to hang up.
You got one
I
for
get to
him?
hang up right now.
Yes, parting gift is so long.
It was a pleasure being with you guys. Let's do it again sometime soon, okay?
Hey, Bruce, remember one thing. Without you, I don't have a job.
And I told that story last week, Bruce, how the three of us, ironically, I was number 1, you were number 2, and Les, in his own way, was number 3. We all got kicked out game after game after game from the Mets clubhouse. Never forget that as long as I live.
Yeah, it was a great. It'll be 7 years ago this
Since
August.
1984. Since 84.
Yeah. Guys, it's a pleasure. Take care.
I'll talk to you soon, Bruce. Thanks a lot. All right, that's Bruce Levine. And unless we do have one more segment, this is our final segment that we do here on the Grobstein Schuster Express. It's the Walk Down Memory Lane segment. I'll lead off today. I'll give you a chance to think of something from your long, long time covering sports here in Chicago. And it was a Sunday night baseball game for me, and it was an ESPN game. And a lot of the celebrities were in attendance. One of them being John Cusack, who's a Chicagoan as well. And he was at Wrigley Field. This is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon before the game. And he and I don't know who else, they were shagging flies in the outfield that day. And Jesse Rogers, another good friend of both of ours, Jesse was hosting the show back at the Score. And he asked me, he knew that, that Cusack was shagging balls in the outfield. So he asked me to get him on the air because Jesse always wanted a guest. And so I would get him a guest. So I approached John Cusack. I got him into the dugout. I said, hey, John, blah, 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 the Score, yada, yada. Can we get you on just for a couple of minutes? And he didn't want to do it. He was sort of snitty, for lack of a better term. So I finally, cajoled him and coerced him into coming on. He sat down, but you can tell he was really antsy. He just didn't want to do this. So probably like Jesse went off into one of his long tangent questions right off the bat. And I remember those are back in the days when we had those giant, like they look like army phones, okay? Those giant cell phones that were like a brick or something like that. And anyway, so he looked at the phone. He was listening to Jesse, and he didn't want to do it. So he took the phone and he sort of flung it at me. And he said, I don't want to do this. And he sort of walked away. And he was a real creep for doing that, to be honest with you. And so I remember I picked up the phone off the ground in the Cubs dugout, and Jesse's still asking one of his long, windy questions. And then finally I picked up the phone and I said, well, Jesse, I got to tell you, John Cusack has already left the building, so to speak. And here I am. And because he didn't have cue cards to read and he didn't know what to say, he decided not to do the interview. So that was my John Cusack story. Won't forget that. Been in a lot of good movies, ones that I've really enjoyed. But for that particular day, I was not a fan of his.
Did you ever interview Joan Cusack?
No, and she looks to be a very pleasant person. That's all I can say.
By all accounts, I never met her. By all accounts, from those I've talked to, she is. Now, I've got one photo with that exact same type of cell phone, brick-shaped cell phone. It was from 1986. I still have the photo. I'm holding it, and I'm standing on the court at the old Boston Garden. What had happened earlier in that game? It's kind of like a stump whatever question, but it was 1986.
I would imagine that's when Jordan scored his 63.
It was. And they lost in double overtime to the Celtics. And they got swept 3-0, as it turned out. That was other than the Bill Russell, John Havlicek, maybe Bob Cousy era. The team that they had then with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and all those guys, that team they had in 86 was by far the best team that the Celtics ever had. And one game was Michael Jordan took it right to the wire. They should have won it. And Kevin McHale extended it to a second overtime. He was laying on his back, threw it up with the shot clock running out and with 1 second left in the on the main clock. And he banked it in, and it went to a second overtime, and they lost.
Well, that's arguably one of the greatest teams. Well, it's not arguably. It is one of the greatest teams. Whether it's the greatest team or not, that's, remains to be seen. But they had the front line of McHale, Parrish, and Bird, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge in the backcourt, and all those guys. Bill Walton came off the bench. He was sort of rejuvenated towards the end of his career after having all those foot injuries, and he actually helped them out to win that championship that season. Again, arguably with the Lakers Showtime teams and of course the Bulls dynasty teams, that 86 Celtic team among the other Celtic great championship teams is one of the best in NBA history.
Again, the Bird, Parrish, McHale, DJ team, that was the best in my opinion.
Of all time.
Of that era. I said the Bird, Parrish, DJ, McHale team. No, the team with Bill Russell and John Havlicek and Cousy and whatever, for that era, and they were much different then, of course, than now, but that team was unbeatable.
Well, we were adults at that point, but when the Lakers played the Celtics in the championship series, and it was Bird and Magic, of course, going back and forth, that was among the best basketball I've ever seen. Not a Chicago team, of course, but among the best basketball I've ever seen. Those teams, whether it was the Showtime Lakers or the Celtic dynasty teams or championship teams, it was just incredible, incredible basketball. How could you not love that?
Well, the Red Auerbach teams, though, they were great, but boy, was he hated by all the other coaches and GMs in the league because he was just a cocky SOB.
Well, here's the other thing. When people talk about those great teams, and let's face it, they won 11 championships in 13 seasons or something like that. But here's the one drawback when people argue about that from the Celtics standpoint. Back in those days, unlike today, when you have to win upwards of 4 series to win a championship, back then, Les, all you had to do was win 2 series to win a championship.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
And the travel wasn't anywhere near as extensive overall as it is nowadays.
The Lakers teams with Weston Baylor were great. They couldn't beat the Celtics. They couldn't do it.
No, they couldn't. Anyway, Les, I think that'll wrap it up, as we've been doing this for about an hour's long. So as always, it's been fun. We do appreciate Bruce Levine joining us. We always appreciate our sponsor, Nick and Ivy's, located at 1026 South State Street in downtown Lockport. And so, Les, I'll talk to you during a week, and we'll do this again next Sunday night.
Looking forward to it, everybody. Have a great week.
You as well. Take care, everybody.